Hey guys, it's Sam and this is my May wrap-up. May wrap-up, or is it farther along in the year? No, it's just May. I got nervous for a second. So before we get started, I have two quick announcements. One is that BOOKNET Fest registration is now live. So if you're coming to BOOKNET Fest this year and you want to get your ticket, the link for the registration will be down below. Get your ticket soon. Second big announcement is that the Booktube SFF Awards voting is now live. So that is going to be going through June 8th. So if you want to vote for your favorite nominee for the Booktube SFF Awards, we have a ton of categories. The link for that is down below, and the live show award show will be happening later on this month here on my channel. We'll have an announcement about that soon. So let's jump into the books. A lot of these books are actually Booktube SFF Award nominees. Anyway, it was a big nominee reading month for me. So the first book I picked up was Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. This is the first book in this duology, which I'm not even sure what the duology name is. And I've already done a full review and discussion on this book, so I'll leave those linked on the screen. I adore Laini Taylor's writing. It's beautiful and stunning and everything, and I really enjoy her world and the themes that she explores. She does a lot with like war and stuff that I really like, and the like tragedies of war and the impact of it on both sides, and I really like those themes and just how beautiful and magical her worlds are. But I didn't find this book as satisfying as I found the first book, The Daughter Smoke and Bone, in that series. So this was a little bit of a letdown for me. There is insta-love in this story. There's insta-love in like every Laini Taylor book. And it just didn't work for me in this. I've heard that people either like the insta-love more in this one or they like it more in Daughter Smoke and Bone. There's like no in between. I am firmly on the side of Daughter Smoke and Bone for this. So while I enjoyed this, I found it to be a little lacking in some places, the insta-love, and portions of the plot and pacing were just really slow. Still really enjoyed this. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. It's between a 3.75 and a 4. I found that as I've had more time away from it, I'm forgetting more of it, because when you first get out of it, you're like, oh my god, Laini Taylor's writing is so stunning. And it kind of like boosts my feelings about it, but then when I get a little bit more separated from it, I'm like, okay. But as a story, it's a little bit less. But I still really enjoyed it. I plan to read Youth of Nightmares. It was still decent. 3.75 to 4 stars. Then also for the awards, I reread Monstrous Volume 1. This is by Marjorie Liu and Sana Takeda. I talked about this the end of 2016 when I first read this, and I love this graphic novel series. This is a female-dominated fantasy world that's inspired by Japanese mythology and folklore, and it follows different races of people. There are like humans, and then there's like witches, and then there's ancients, which are like most of their like high-powered fantasy kind of creatures, and then there's arcanics, and they're kind of a mix between humans and those fantasy creatures, and it's so cool. There's also magical talking cats. There's so much I love about this. The art is stunning. I really enjoy the themes. It dabbles, it touches its foot sort of into like, sort of like horror, like the Eldritch variety, but not anything that's too scary for me. There is some gore in here, but it's not like, I wouldn't call this a scary graphic novel by any means. It's so cool. I love it. This first volume, 5 out of 5 stars, again on reread. I love it so much. Then I actually listened to Jane Unlimited by Kristen Kishore on audiobook. I've also done a full review for this book, so I'll link that on the screen. This book's very hard to talk about because it starts out feeling like one thing and then it turns into many other things. So the whole premise of this story is that this girl Jane gets invited to this exotic island. She's recently lost her aunt who raised her, and her aunt always said, if you ever get invited to this island, you have to go. And it's the island of like a family friend, acquaintance type person, and they are ungodly rich, like just completely out of this world rich. And so the story follows kind of the escapades there and all this drama, and at one point the story converges into 5 different timelines, possible paths, unlimited paths, as you could say, that Jane could take. So the thing that happened with this with me is I enjoyed some of those storylines, some of those paths, and enjoyed others less. So this is a genre-bending book for sure. I could not even tell you which category it would fall in. There's a lot of different things going on, and it was enjoyable. I really liked the audiobook. It was very unexpected. I went into this book almost completely blind, so if you want to do that, I would really recommend doing that. I really love Kristen Kishore as an author. And it was something unlike, I've never read anything like this, but it almost had this like short story feel to it, even though it was all contained within like the same characters or whatever. It had this short story feel to it because each story felt so different. So it's really hard to rate and review a book like that when there's all these different plots going on. So I ultimately gave this 3.5 out of 5 stars. Then one of our nominees actually for the awards is Monstrous Volume 2 by Marjorie Liu and Sana Takeda. This I also enjoyed. It's just continuing on the same trajectory. I enjoyed it very minutely, slightly less than the first volume. It was like a 4.5. Still really good. Like, it's building up more. It's just really great. Just the first volume was just so like a breath of fresh air to me, and this one was still amazing, but like it didn't quite make it there. What I really like about this is that there's a ton of unlikable characters in here, and our main character in particular is kind of unlikable at times, and I just really adore her, and I adore her for so many reasons. She's such a badass. There's just a lot of complicated things going on, a lot of like character dynamics and all this stuff, but really love this graphic novel series. I need to just keeping up with it because I've been really bad about letting my graphic novels, like the graphic novels I follow, slide to the wayside. I'm like, I love them so much though. So I need to be better about reading these, but 4.5 out of 5 stars. Amazing, wonderful, beautiful. Then I picked up Our Dark Duet by Victoria Schwab. This is the second book in the Monsters of Verity series. I just did a review and discussion on this on Monday, so check that out for more of my in-depth thoughts. As I said in my review, there's not a ton I can say about this without spoiling it because a lot of my thoughts are really, really wrapped up in like exact plot points and stuff like that. But I did find this very simple and disappointing in comparison to the first book. I went into the first book with no expectations and really enjoyed it, and this book I felt like dropped the ball in a lot of ways. There were a lot of plot pieces and plot strings that just weren't tied up. There were a lot of things that I feel like weren't properly explained, and a lot of the themes and tropes explored I feel like weren't really nuanced and were pretty predictable and, like I said, just kind of simple. So I ultimately was disappointed by this. I still enjoyed reading it. It was a solid 3 stars for me, but it was just a letdown in comparison to the first book, and I felt like it had a lot more potential and didn't quite live up to it. We have Paper Girls Volume 1. This is by Brian K. Vaughan and Cliff Chang, and this is another Booktube SFF Award nominee read. So the third volume is actually nominated, but I have to catch up by reading the first and the second volume first before I read that third volume. This is weird. So this takes place in the 80s, and it kind of has like a Stranger Things vibe to it. So you follow a girl who's I think about 12, and she's starting a paper route. She meets up with some other girls the night after Halloween that also are on a paper route, and weird stuff starts happening. Like weird, out of this world stuff. There's these people that don't speak any language from Earth, and they're dressed weird, and there's like dinosaurs. There's a lot of stuff that's happening. And it was kind of hard for me to follow, not in like it's a complicated way, but it's like nothing's being explained to me and everything's just being thrown at me, and there's just like, there's stuff everywhere. That's kind of how I felt. So I liked elements of this because it does have that kind of Stranger Things vibe to it, but it was just a little more out there where Stranger Things feels like based in reality in some weird way, and this was just so like, so out there. There's also a couple like problematic characters that do get told they're being problematic in text, but it's still something that's like slightly grating and just doesn't really feel like it would have been necessary. I know it's a series that's taking place in the 80s and there's a different time period, but it still was just like, why though? And yeah, there's just a lot of things that I'm not quite sure about. I'm going to continue because I obviously have to continue for the nominees, but also just because it's enough to get me interested, but it still just didn't feel like enough. Like, you know, especially in comparison to like Monstrous Volume 1 that was like hooked me in. And then you have this where I'm just like, I'm very ambivalent about you. I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. And the last thing I read was Raven Stratagem by Yoon-Ha Lee. And this is a second book in the, I think it's Machinations of War. I forget what the series title is. It's an adult science fiction series, and this is one of our nominees for the Booktube SFF Awards for the science fiction category. And I did not like the first book in this series, Nine Fox Gambit. I believe I have a full review for that, so I will link that on the screen if I do. But it's a very weird series that I find incredibly hard to follow, so it's obviously a science fiction series. It's more of a military sci-fi, and the laws of physics are not the same as our own, and I find a lot of the descriptions and what's going on, like plot-wise and action-wise, really hard to follow myself. But this book I was pleasantly surprised by, because even though I wasn't blown away by it, I still liked it more than the first book. I listened to this book on audio, and I highly recommend the audio because I found it easier to follow while still getting lost sometimes, but overall easier to follow. And this book was more character driven, I feel, so that was nice because I did feel like the first book, when you had these character moments, was really good, but you just didn't have enough of those. You had a lot of battles in the first book and just like all of this stuff going on, where this dived into character backstories and just dived into character interactions, and that was the highlight of the series for me. So I ended up enjoying this a lot more than I thought I was going to. I went into this with super low expectations, and I ended up kind of enjoying it. It still wasn't an audiobook that I was like super compelled to pick up though. Like when I wasn't reading it, I just didn't really think about it, but I ended up liking the majority of it. Like it was still pretty good, but ultimately again, I still just can't, something about the series that I just can't follow. I don't think I'm stupid. Like there's just something about it and the way that it's written where people are either gonna love it or hate it. I have yet to talk to somebody who's been really in between on this series. Either you like genuinely really like it, or you genuinely like it's just kind of not for you. And ultimately this series still just really isn't for me, but I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars. I'm not going to do a full review for this one, but I will definitely be talking about it more in the live show for the Booktube SFF Awards. And I know for a fact that this series has conflicting opinions even among judges, so it should be a very lively discussion. So as you can see, my reading month, while I did read some couple things that I really liked, it's sort of like middle of the road, like mediocre, 3-star reads. And that's okay with me because I genuinely read like a lot this month for how busy I was in May. I was moving and finishing up my internship and all this stuff, so I was pretty happy with the things that I read. But just a little like, middle of the road kind of month for me. So comment down below and let me know how your reading month went. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see all of you guys soon. Bye.